Hi there and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm ABC News Political Director Rick Klein, joined here by Deputy Political Director Mary Alice Parks. The first time in 41 days, a briefing from Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Also some news right at the top. We're going to talk about the possibility of another shutdown now that peace has been reached for only 2.5 weeks or so. But first, Mary Alice, some news that was announced just moments ago by the administration regarding Venezuela. The Treasury Secretary and the National Security Advisor saying that there are new sanctions in place right now and something of a threat if the Guaido presidency is not allowed to proceed.
And really threats of military action if any American assets or American personnel were to come under physical threat. That was very interesting and stark from the National Security Advisor Bolton there. I was also struck by the fact that he said that Vice President Pence had personal one-on-one conversations with this new interim president that the U.S. government is acknowledging.
And a lot of concerns about what the impact on the economy would be, particularly as we're coming out of this shutdown, a bit of a perilous period. But we should note that as of this moment, negotiations are about to resume between members of the conference committee who are in the House and the Senate trying to decide how to proceed on a potential immigration compromise. The president sounded pessimistic on that over the weekend. Not a lot new right now from Sarah Sanders. She's mostly said she didn't want to negotiate on any of the terms. I want to ask Meredith McGraw, who's standing by at the White House, what your sense is right now about where negotiations stand and whether the president is prepared to put down any other markers before this conference committee commences.
Hey there. Right now, it's really uncertain about what a compromise between the White House and Democrats would actually look like. The president yesterday seemed to express some doubt over any fruitful negotiations happening between Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill. Now, that group of that bipartisan, bicameral group has its work cut out for them. They have just 18 days to try to come up with a deal that would satisfy the president's demands. He said yesterday in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that he's still committed to $5.7 billion for his border wall, while Democrats say that they're hoping for a more permanent fix for immigration.
And we're going to get the view on Capitol Hill in just a moment. But Mary Alice, as you know, the fact that workers are back at work today in the federal workforce, 800,000 who have gone without paychecks for more than a month, now are going to be back at work. I want you to take a listen to this. Our folks from around the country have gathered some interviews and some material from federal workers who were impacted by this shutdown, are now very grateful to be working again.
I'm just very thankful to be back at work, thankful for my job.
I'm very excited. It's been a long time. I'm ready to get back to work.
It was scary and just, I don't like being off schedule.
You feel for your coworkers and, people who just weren't prepared for something like this. Nobody's ever prepared for anything like this.
Relief on some level that the immediate crisis is over, but that's coupled with just a strong determination to make sure it doesn't happen again.
They're going to try to do in 3 weeks what they can do in 5 weeks. So any one of us that ask them, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to shut down the government again. That's what we all think. They're going to do it again. Because what? A vanity wall?
And as we hear, the White House can't rule out the possibility of another shutdown.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to listen to that anxiety again over the possibility that we could be right back in the middle of a shutdown in just a few weeks. And Sarah Sanders really did little to discourage, dissuade any of that kind of fear that's currently sort of persistent among federal employees.
And our man on Capitol Hill standing by, John Parkinson. What is the sense as these negotiations get underway? What can you tell us about this conference committee, what they're going to be working on, who is on it, and what kind of voices they're going to be listening to?
Yeah, Rick, well, I think you can return back to the question about the scope of this committee, the conference committee, what it's going to actually be talking about. And what I keep hearing from sources really close to this is that it's going to be just border security. It's not going to be this broad immigration deal where there's DACA thrown in there, temporary protected status, or chain migration. They're looking at what can we put money down on for border security, whether it's a smart wall, whether it's money for a physical barrier, whether it's for sensors down on the border security, patrol agents, that kind of thing. They want to look for specific appropriations, and you look at the people that are on the conference committee, and it's filled with appropriators and not people from the Judiciary Committee, which would probably be more involved with deciding some of these other policy questions on immigration reform.
So does that limit the possibilities of a compromise? How could that get wedged in there where you have the White House not really setting down a lot of firm markers here? The conference committee itself, you're saying, won't be enough.
Well, I think that it's good that they have negotiations going on at this level to deal with border security. I think that, as you've seen on Capitol Hill, there's always potential for this sort of grand bargain to come together with players that are either right center stage or even people that are working in secret negotiations that are separate from what might be the main topic at hand. I think that in this case, we'll probably see a border security deal. Right now, it looks like Democrats and Republicans are still dug in on this impasse that led to the shutdown for 35 days. And I don't think that you'll really see much of this movement beyond the scenes on DACA. They've already got an extension. It looks like they've got 9 months or so from the courts to really work through that issue, too.
So a lot to get figured out in the next 2.5 weeks. John Parkinson and Meredith McGraw, we thank you for that. As we mentioned, the White House a bit focused today about the financial impact of the shutdown. And Mary Alice, some new numbers out just today from the Congressional Budget Office that put in pretty stark view what this has meant, what the shutdown meant. $11 billion in total economic damage through the shutdown. Of course, they're not calculating about what another potential shutdown would mean. That's a big number. That's twice that you could pay for 2 walls under President Trump's proposal.
That's
there.
right, more than the president asked for. It was interesting, though, to listen to members of the administration totally refute those numbers. They said they were inflated. Basically said they just did not agree, but did acknowledge that there was clearly personal hardship as well. The toll it took on individual families struggling to pay bills.
I want to bring in a guest now, Kristen Brody, a economics professor at Alabama A&M University. Thank you for being back here on the briefing room. And Professor, walk us through why the damage is real, why the damage happened. We heard a lot along the way about workers who missed paychecks, but the White House kept saying that the basic functions of government would continue. Why is it fair to assume that there was actual damage to the economy?
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. As discussed, the CBO released the numbers today saying that the total cost was $11 billion. $3 billion in the fourth quarter of 2018 and another $8 billion in the current quarter. So that really is a lot of money. I understand that they were saying that there are trillions of dollars in terms of the whole economy, and so that it wouldn't have a macro effect. But you really do have to think about the people that did not get their pay, all of those federal workers. Furthermore, you still have contractors that are not going to get back pay at all. So what about the people who lost their homes, their cars, could not pay various bills? Those are things that they may not be able to get back. And I think that that's something that does need to be considered. We need to consider the impact on the individuals in addition to the $11 billion macro number.
And is there a certain part of the economy that was most impacted by the government shutdown?
Well, I mean, when you look at federal workers, those located in D.C. and elsewhere, even here in Alabama, where we have Redstone Arsenal. So those various government areas, and then the various federal contractors, all of that affects spending, right? That goes to consumption. So I think that has to be considered.
Just want to get you on this point because we heard from Larry Kudlow, the president's economics advisor, that there would be no damages, no long-term damages to the economy. He acknowledged personal hardships and he tried not to diminish that, but he said, quote, the switch goes right back on. Is that true? Or are there services that were not rendered during this time that will linger in terms of economic impact?
So I agree that, yes, the switch is back on. Back pay will come to people. But when you look at $11 billion that was lost, $8 billion is going to come back. What about the other $3 billion? Looking at it from a macro point of view, you may not think that the $3 billion is a lot. But again, what about people who lost their cars, that they're not going to be able to get that back? Rent money that was lost, various homeless shelters, women's shelters, things of that nature. What are those people supposed to do? They cannot get that time back. So it's good that the government is open now, but there's no way to get that back for those people.
Kristen Brody from Alabama A&M University, professor of economics. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate your insights on this.
Thank you for having me.
And Mary Alice, you could tell the concern from the White House. They're trying to reset the decks. This first briefing in 41 days. They're trying to say, look, the economy is going to be fine after this shutdown that the president said he wanted, and that ultimately he caved in the negotiations to end. And
they tried to avoid answering questions about what the impact could be of another government shutdown. Sarah Sanders repeatedly saying that it was not the goal to end up shutting down the government, but again, doing very little to say definitively one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's take a look at what people are saying about all of this. Our ABC News Washington Post poll was in the field, as you know, Mary Alice, last week, gauging the temperature of the American people on this. We saw the president dip near his record low in terms of his approval ratings. We also saw just a vast lack of confidence in the president's decision-making abilities. Only 35% say they trust the president to make decisions, the right decisions for the country's future. Two-thirds of the country almost say they do not trust him on that most basic of tasks.
It was interesting to me, too. Another number, 39% said that only 39% said that he had the temperament needed to serve effectively. These are just really difficult numbers to get over. You look at an empathy gap, it goes even lower, only 33% of respondents saying that they think the president understands the problems that people like them face. So you can always sort of assume there's going to be a big partisan divide in these polls, but these are low numbers nonetheless that really get to his personality and temperament.
And we should know that there wasn't a lot of trust for Democrats in their decision-making in all of this. I think it was a pox on both your houses feeling about all of this. Not a lot of trust of Washington overall. But I was struck by how much of a drop-off we saw in the president's numbers on the issues that really drove him to office: the economy, jobs, the deficit, as was discussed here with new numbers from the CBO on the deficit. Just a total collapse in support for the president's decision-making on those issues.
Actually, in every single issue area, the president had a gap between how well people expected him to do and how many people expected him to do well and be able to improve the economy, improve issues of the deficit or fighting terrorism or immigration. A gap between their expectations and how they thought he was doing today. In every single issue area, it seemed the respondents thought he was underperforming.
And those expectations are fueling lots of speculation, lots of movement on the 2020 front.
Right.
I want to talk about Kamala Harris and her big night last night. But first, Howard Schultz, the former Starbucks CEO, making a lot of waves with his announcement last night that he is, in fact, exploring a presidential candidacy. Take a look at some of the video that he put out in talking about his exploration.
I am seriously thinking of running for president. I will run as a centrist independent outside of the two-party system.
Outside of the two-party system, Mary Alice, that means a third-party candidacy. That means that there's going to be a lot of people upset about that, and a lot of them are letting Howard Schultz know about it.
Right. There's a lot of room for a businessman or woman to make waves in the Democratic primary. We were just saying there's such distrust of Washington, someone that could bring in that outsider appeal. But here he's doing something different, running outside of both parties, and it's that part of his candidacy that's getting a lot of blowback today, as Democrats say that he could siphon off votes that they would need to have a chance at defeating the president.
And a stinging rebuke from Michael Bloomberg, who himself has thought about running as a third-party candidate a couple of times, polled on it extensively for this campaign cycle. Ultimately, he has said he would only run as a Democrat if he runs, and he says flat out, you can't win, and you're going to let Trump win if you go forward with this, Howard Schultz.
I was also struck by the Washington State Party, the Democratic Party there. The chair was out very visibly today, saying that she had never been contacted by Howard Schultz, obviously Starbucks headquartered there in the city where I grew up, and that kind of personal blowback, if you can't win your hometown, that doesn't bode well going for sort of a national bid.
And that same state party won Twitter over the weekend with their message on a venti cup. Don't do it, Howard. Don't do it. We did mention, though, Kamala Harris. She, a week ago today, actually, she announced her candidacy on Good Morning America. She has had quite a ride since then, culminating in an event last night in Oakland. I mean, just look at those pictures, Mary Alice. I mean, that is a serious event from Kamala Harris that to me was a statement about her placement in this field.
Absolutely. That event took a lot of planning, but also to showcase the enthusiasm that clearly people have in her hometown for her. It was a diverse group, a big group. Estimates that 20,000 people were there, and her speech really commanding in that way. We have yet to see another potential Democratic candidate command a crowd like that. Those look like Bernie Sanders-style crowds, and she was really holding her own up there.
Yeah, and no other candidate, as you've been pointing out, Mary Alice, has come anything close to this so far. By far the largest crowd, by far the biggest attempt to try to draw a crowd. A lot of Democrats have been telling me over the last few days that whatever Senator Harris has done, they wish they could do it as well, because this has been quite a rollout.
And it's actually not over. She has a town hall in Iowa tonight.
Exactly, and that continues along with the 2020 discussion. All right, that does it for this edition of the Briefing Room. We just did get some news in, though. There is a new date for the State of the Union. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's a week from tomorrow, February 5th instead, so mark your calendars. We'll be here for the whole run-up. For Mary Alice Parks, I'm Rick Klein. Catch us next time.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.